Hey guys, thanks for coming to Middle Class Reactions. Today we're going to take a peek at the Joe Rogan had on Douglas Murray and Dave Smith. It's one of the wildest debates because I've never seen someone like Douglas Murray sit down against someone like Dave Smith for 3 hours. And the other thing is, I've never seen someone just actively use so many bad faith debate tactics. You'll see what I mean. It starts off pretty immediately. We're 49 seconds into the video right now, okay? And yeah, you're gonna see what I mean. Let's take a look.
These things are always like Pierce Morgan-y, which is fine, where everyone's screaming over each other and, there's 5 different people talking over each other. There's never just rational conversations where you discuss things. And I respect both of you. I think both of you are brilliant. And I bet you agree on a lot of things, and I bet you disagree on a lot of things. And it'd be fascinating to see your perspectives on these things. So that's why you're here together.
Okay.
And
Well,
Douglas,
can I ask you something?
yes, sir.
Since the war in Israel began, and since the war in Ukraine began, you've had quite a lot of people who are very against both in different ways.
Yes.
Do you think you've had enough people on who are supportive of either war?
I don't know that word enough, if that's a good word.
Let's say enough people who are on the side of Israel instead of wild critics of Israel.
Well, I've had a few. I mean, I believe God Sad is on the side of Israel.
For sure.
Jordan is on the side of Israel.
You had Mike Baker, Coleman Hughes.
Yeah.
Coleman did it for like 20 minutes. So it wasn't why he was here.
No, I mean, none of them. And none of them is why they're here. It's a good question.
Do you think you've tilted one way?
Me personally?
No, just with the guests you've had.
The guests, yeah, probably more tilted towards the idea that perhaps the way they've done it is barbaric.
Mm-hmm. But why do you think that is? Just out of interest, I'm just interested in your selection of guests because you're like the world's #1 podcast. So
yeah, it's not. I don't think about it that way. I just think I'd like to talk to this person.
But can I just? Sorry, it's your show. But
sure.
If you're going to interview historians of conflict or historians in general,
it's wild because Douglas Murray we're 2.5 minutes in. Is starting to go after Joe Rogan already. That's what I was saying when I've never seen anyone do this on Joe's podcast. Just immediately start going after him. It's kind of a crazy tactic, but we'll see how it works out.
General.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you get somebody like Ian Carroll or?
Yeah, but Ian Carroll, I didn't bring him on for that purpose. I brought him on because I want to find out, like, how does one get involved in the whole conspiracy theory business? Because his whole thing is just conspiracies.
Sure.
But
do you have any? I mean, there's been a tilt in the conversation, in both conversations, in the last couple of years, and it's largely to do with people who have appointed themselves experts, who are not experts.
You mean like Ian? I don't think he.
We're already we're 3 minutes and 16 seconds in. We're already making an argument of authority. He's already making an argument that appeals to authority, which is one of the worst tactics you can do in a debate. Yeah, I mean, I used to have pre this debate, I had some respect for Douglas Murray, but after this, it's just completely gone.
Appoints himself an expert in anything.
Who's that other dude who thinks he's an expert on Churchill?
Darryl Cooper does not think he's an expert.
In fact, I think it's everybody else is always calling him an expert, and he's like, I'm just a history
Have
nerd.
you ever absorbed any of his material? Have you ever consumed any of his podcasts or anything like that?
I tried.
Yeah?
It's pretty hard to listen to somebody who says, I don't know what I'm talking about, but now I'm going to talk. Or I don't know about this. Or I'm not capable of debating this historian, but I'm going to just tell you what I think.
Yeah, but that's not exactly what Darryl was saying. I mean, Darryl's point of view, however you feel about this, what Darryl is saying is he doesn't really like doing debates. He likes to do long format stuff where he can really explain his position.
If you throw a lot of shit out there, there's some point at which I'm just raising questions is not a valid thing.
Mm-hmm.
You're not raising questions. You're not asking questions. You're telling people something.
Do you think Darryl's doing that?
I think there's a whole bunch of guys doing that.
I think
Dave is doing that. very obviously. Dave's a
That Dave's look right here, his look just in this is like the pure shock, like the audacity that Douglas Murray has to bring, like, to make this his argument. You can see Dave's face is all of our reaction for this debate. And now's where it's about to get interesting.
comedian, but he's now mainly talking about Israel.
No, I don't know if I'm mainly talking about Israel.
That's all I see you
have
on the
opinions.
internet doing.
Yeah, but that's you.
Well, that might be what you've seen.
It's
but
just
I don't
you
think that's.
consuming
But
clips.
that is also your shtick now, isn't it?
Well, what do you mean by that's my shtick?
Well, you're not a geopolitics guy in general, are you?
I don't even know exactly what you're asking.
I'm saying you've decided, being a comedian, you've decided now to become somebody who talks about Israel and the conflict.
I think you're incorrect. I don't think it's a decision. I just think you have long-form conversations, multiple of them. It's a huge event that's in the news, so it comes up. I don't think it's a thing. I think if you're on the outside, you'd say, oh, look, they're trying to get attention by talking about this very polarizing issue publicly. That's
you do get attention from that. If you'd spent the last year speaking about Myanmar, you would not be on my lips.
Yeah, but he does talk about Yemen constantly. He talks about a lot of things that aren't in the news.
Well, I tend to talk about the conflicts that my government is directly involved in, which I think is reasonable to me. But I don't quite get, like, what's all the appeal to authority stuff? I mean, you have to be an expert, or
no,
and
I think
what exactly
authority
makes
matters.
you an
I think
expert?
authority matters, and I think that if you just throw a lot of shit out there and then say, I'm not interested in the...
Did you notice there Dave said, hey, what's this appeal to authority thing? And Doug's response is, no, but I think authority matters. So he said no, but then immediately goes back to the appeal to authority. Did y'all catch that?
alternative views on this, and particularly when it's a counter-narrative that is wildly off. And when you get people... Look, I just feel... We should get it out straight away. I feel you've opened the door to quite a lot of people who've now got a big platform who have been throwing out counter-historical stuff of a very dangerous kind.
You mean Darryl? Are you talking about Darryl?
And now he's going after Joe Rogan. I mean, that's wild to do on the biggest podcast in the world, going after the host who invited you on his show. That's...
Darryl, who's the other one?
I don't think Darryl has...
Derek,
I don't think there's anything dangerous about
what's the other
what
guy? Derek... what's his name? Cooper, is it? Which one is it?
No, that's
Darryl
Cooper.
Darryl Cooper. Who's the other one? There was one I just checked on the way here. Darryl Cooper, and then... Oh, yeah, Darryl Cooper, Ian Carroll. Look, these guys are not historians. They're not knowledgeable about anything.
No one's calling Ian Carroll a
No,
historian.
but then why listen to their views on Churchill?
Darryl is incredibly knowledgeable.
He's not.
Yeah,
he's not. He's wildly... Several...
Okay, so before we go any further, I've already got this pulled up. Right, actually, hold on. We'll see what Doug says here.
Reasons. One is when he was offered to debate the current greatest living biographer of Churchill, he said, I can't, because he knows much more than me, and I admire his work and I've learned from it, but I can't possibly debate him. That's Andrew Roberts.
Right, but you don't have to be able...
Also, that's not what Douglas. That's not what Darryl Cooper said. Darryl Cooper said, hey, I've learned a lot from this guy, but I don't really like doing debates. I like doing the long-form podcasting, which he doesn't have to debate.
To debate people, to have opinions.
No, you don't have to debate people.
If it's not your thing.
But if you, for instance, but if you say, I've decided that Churchill is the bad guy in World War II.
It's not what he said. It's not what he said.
Neither Carroll nor Cooper have said that?
Well,
okay, all right, pause. So, we're going to go take a look exactly what Darryl Cooper says here. How out of context Douglas Murray, and not, to be fair, Douglas Murray wasn't the only one who tried doing this. Piers Morgan tried doing this. A whole list of people tried. Just taking it so out of context. Here's the actual clip from, and I'll link to this Tucker Carlson episode down below in the description. How out of context this was taken was truly mind-boggling. Let's listen.
How would you assess Winston Churchill? I got in trouble with my podcast partner, Jocko Willink, one time because he's a New England Dutchman who's his family. It's near and dear to they're Dutch, but very near and dear to their heart that Winston Churchill is a hero, right?
Well, everyone
thinks that. He really thinks that. And I told him that I think, and maybe I'm being a little hyperbolic, maybe.
That's important. That context right there is important. Maybe I'm being a little hyperbolic here.
But I told him, maybe trying to provoke him a little bit, that I thought Churchill was the chief villain of the Second World War.
Now, what and Piers Morgan did this, and a lot of other people did, is they took that last 3 seconds. Just the part where Darryl Cooper says, I think Winston Churchill is the true villain of the Second World War. Clipped it, and then spread that out everywhere to make it like that's what Darryl Cooper said. Here's the other context of that, which was conveniently left out.
Now, he didn't kill the most people. He didn't commit the most atrocities. But I believe, and I think when you really get into it and tell the story right and don't leave anything out, you see that he was primarily responsible for that war becoming what it did, becoming something other than an invasion of Poland. Or just, at every step of the way, like people are very often, I find, surprised to learn. There's a 2-step process.
Well,
right?
why don't you just make the case for that? Okay, so you've made your statement. A lot of people are thinking, well, wait a second, you said.
Okay, so y'all can, and again, I will link this clip down in the description below. It's 12 minutes. Go listen to Darryl's case. It's what I think is a compelling case. But you can debate that. You can debate whether Churchill unnecessarily caused that war to happen. You can debate that. But Darryl Cooper didn't say, oh, the true villain of World War II is Winston Churchill. That's not what he said.
Listen, I don't know what Carol said, but Darryl Cooper has not said that. What he said was he jokes with his friend Jocko, who's an Anglo-Saxon. He jokes with him. I think that Churchill was the secret villain of World War II. And what he's saying is by Churchill's actions, the war escalated. He's not saying anything.
He's not just asking questions then, is he?
No, but
he's got a point
the claim
of view.
isn't that he's just asking questions. Yeah, he has a point of view.
You can explain this better. He literally says he's
said
joking.
In the comment, he goes, listen, I'm being hyperbolic. And then he once again disclaimed, he goes, and I'm not claiming Churchill committed the most atrocities or was the worst part. But in many ways, I do view him as the chief villain, as my hyperbolic, provocative statement. But
what's
Douglas,
the point of that?
Well, okay, but Pat Buchanan wrote an entire book on this. Is he not allowed? Is he not an expert? Is he not allowed to be
he's
interviewed?
Certainly not an expert. He can be interviewed. I've watched Pat Buchanan debate. I watched Pat Buchanan debate against Churchill historians, and he was absolutely leveled because he doesn't know what he's talking about.
When did Pat Buchanan debate and get leveled?
About 20 years ago.
I'm just curious.
So he has to go back to a 20-year-old debate. Granted, he might have got leveled. I haven't seen the debate. I don't know. But a 20-year-old debate is his arguing point.
Against Andrew Roberts and several other historians at Intelligence Squared in London. I was there. He didn't know what he was talking about. He had a contrary view, and it was interesting and stimulating to hear. But if you only get the contrary view, which is, isn't it fun if we all pretend Churchill was the bad guy of the 20th century, at some point you're going to lead people down a path where they think that's the view. And that's horse shit of the most profound kind.
I don't think that's what he's trying to do.
I think that's exactly what they're doing. And the problem is that because your own platform has come about because you're a very successful comedian and much more, and you do ask questions, and you are interested. But there are a lot of people who have come along, partly I think because they've come on this show, who have come along and they've decided, I can play this double game. On the one hand, I'm going to push really edgy and frankly sometimes horrific opinions. And then if you say that's wrong, they say I'm a comedian.
But wait a minute.
How can you tell me I'm just...
So he's trying to talk about Darryl Cooper here. One, Darryl Cooper's not a comedian. And if he was trying to talk about Dave Smith here, Dave Smith has never once been in an argument and went, hey, I'm just a comedian, bro. He's never once said that. So this is another thing Douglas Murry does a lot in this debate, is he makes an argument that wasn't made, and then like Douglas Murray will make the argument and then argue with the argument he made in like at the moment that the person he's there to debate, which is Dave Smith, or the person he's talking about, Darryl Cooper, didn't make. He does that a lot in this podcast.
As a comedian,
Well,
I'm just throwing stuff out
What
there.
horrific opinions that's wrong are you talking about specifically?
Once guys like this get into very obvious stuff, which is
Guys like Darryl?
the ones I'm describing.
You
very
need to
clear.
listen to Darryl to really understand what he's saying. If you take Darryl's words out of context, Darryl has some of the most nuanced, balanced, and charitable views on all the figures in history.
Well, particularly Hitler, it seems.
No, you're.
And here's another crazy thing that Douglas does a lot. He openly said, "Hey, I don't listen to," the way he put it, I can't listen to Darryl Cooper. It's super hard to listen to Darryl Cooper. And then we'll throw a statement out like that, which is like, "Oh, it seems like he's friendly to Hitler." It's like, and by the way, Darryl Cooper, his podcast, here's the Martyr May podcast. It's got 21,000 subs. Here. Look at some of the length of these. You're not talking just a podcast. 5.5 hours, 3 hours and 18, 2 hours 21, 2:45, 2:53, 4 hours, 6.5 hours, 7 hours and 53 minutes. Like and these are multi-part. Like this, he's doing one on socialism, part 7, part 6, part 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So like just in that, he did a super long series. Here's one on the Aztecs. There's one on socialists. Like, it's saying that Darryl Cooper's just randomly throwing out the Hitler thing when you've never watched his show is insane.
Wrong. You're wrong. He doesn't. What did he call him? How did he describe him?
I think he compared him to a methed out psychopath who was holding an entire nation of people hostage, I believe was the way
He also
put it.
said on here that he wasn't anti-Semitic until the Holocaust. There were no speeches of Hitler's in the 1930s.
Again, this is
No.
Listen, this on your
He said he was not public about it.
He said he was downplaying it to win over. He said there was a period where he was downplaying it to win over popular support in Germany.
Yeah.
It was his argument.
There is no historian of World War II who thinks that Hitler was downplaying anti-Semitism in the 1930s. That was what he was doing. He wrote a book about it in the 1920s. He got to power on it, and he grew his power on the back of it.
So here's another point. He just takes him out of context. Darryl was specifically talking about that he wasn't doing the huge rallies and speeches in the early 1930s like he was doing in the late 1930s. You look at 1936, 7, 8, and then going into the 1940s, Hitler was being ultra just brazen about it. The early 1930s, he wasn't. And the books that in the 1920s, Murray's correct. He wrote Mein Kampf in the 1920s. Very correct about that. But Darryl's point was like, hey, he wasn't having these huge rallies and stuff like he was in the late 1930s and 1940s. He was having, in the early 1930s, it was more closed-door meetings until he finished getting into power and until he got more people behind him. Then he went into what you see the videos of the huge rallies and stuff.
The idea that you can argue that in the 1930s, Adolf Hitler was downplaying the anti-Semitism, like, there's no historian who would agree with that. So why would you throw out the idea that in the 1930s, Hitler was not being anti-Semitic in public? That was what he was doing in public. He announces to the German parliament what he wants to do. So when you're throwing out claims like he was keeping it down in the 1930s, first of all, what are you doing? And second...
Well, what Douglas here is doing is just lying because that's not what Darryl said.
Why?
Okay. I mean, I think that it's kind of hard because I don't even know exactly what Darryl's point on that was. And so I'm not really in a position to argue what he was saying there. I don't think you're giving him the most charitable interpretation.
I don't need to give him the most charitable interpretation to be able to see what he's doing.
Okay, I think you're straw-manning him, I should say.
Look, anyone can look up what he said on this show and others, what these two guys in particular have said on repeated podcasts with both of you. It's an attempt to downplay Hitler and always to do down Churchill.
I don't think he downplayed
in
Hitler.
whatever way they
Hitler?
No, I said in conversations with you and others, this is the shtick of these guys. They've decided it's edgy and funny, and I think this is very, very interesting and also very dangerous because we live in an era now that the right has got some mojo back in America. We saw years of crazy left overreach where they tried to make us all say the craziest things. And completely predictably, there are now figures on the right playing with really dark and ugly stuff on their side.
I agree with that.
And they are mainstreaming
I don't
this,
think
and I
Darryl's
think it's
doing that.
partly being mainstreamed by the two people I just described. And both of you have kept speaking to these people, and you don't get on the historians who know about this. And that's just alarming to me.
Well, can I just say, so because I kind of do agree with part of what you said there. Like, I do think it is true that almost as a reaction to like the woke insanity that we've seen on the left, and I think literally, I think nobody's been a more effective critic of that than you. I do think there has kind of been a right-wing reaction that has embraced racialism and is dangerous and not a good path to go down.
And now they're flirting with Holocaust denial and Hitler and absolving Hitler of blame and much more.
I think you're wrong to include Darryl in that group. Now, the other thing is, I'm sorry, because maybe I'm misunderstanding what you're saying. You're saying people that I've had conversations with have downplayed the Holocaust? Well, who are the two guys?
Darryl
Cooper?
Cooper and the other
Ian Carroll.
Carroll.
I've never podcasted with Ian Carroll. I have.
And so that's again, here's another good point is like, you can't just go off and say that like, oh, hey, you're platforming these people, which is the argument he's making. He's making an argument for platforming. And then just be wrong that like Dave Smith hasn't had on Ian Carroll. Joe Rogan just did. But you can't just make the point that like, oh, you're platforming people like this, when one of the people he hadn't even platformed. So he's talking about, it's funny because he's making the argument, you're not an expert on what you're talking about. Since you don't know what you're talking about, these guys shouldn't be allowed on some of these platforms. But Douglas doesn't know about the people that he is talking about. That's the wildest thing to me.
I've podcasted with Darryl Cooper once, and he absolutely did not downplay any of the Nazi atrocities at all. And I think that if we're zooming out here a little bit, maybe this is kind of part of the disconnect. Broadly speaking, in American culture, the idea that it has not been driven into people enough that the Nazis were bad and that Adolf Hitler he is literally the modern devil. He is much more so than the actual devil. Adolf Hitler is what's viewed as the most evil thing, to the point that, I mean, just my entire life growing up, if there was a guy who sold soup on Seinfeld who was like authoritarian, he's a soup Nazi.
Right.
Everyone was Hitler. The left called George Bush Hitler, and they called Obama Hitler, and they called Trump Hitler.
Yes.
Every single enemy that we've gone to war with is always called Hitler. Saddam Hussein's the new Hitler. Muammar Gaddafi's the new Hitler. Putin's the new Hitler. It is so the idea that like we haven't driven into people enough Adolf Hitler was a really bad guy.
I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying just as the left likes to play with very dark, ugly stuff, and they've done it for decades, they have played down Chairman Mao's murder of the Chinese throughout his era in power. They played down Stalin. They still march on occasions with posters of Lenin. They've spent decades trying to do down evils that were done on their side. And I would suggest that one of the things that is going on at the moment is, despite, or maybe because of what you just described, there are movements now on the right in America, subcultures, including people who follow both of you, who are very interested in playing with this absolute beyond the pale thing. Why somebody like Jake Shields wants to play around with Holocaust denial? Why?
I can't answer.
So that's where we're gonna leave off this video, because now they get off of Darryl Cooper topic, which is what I was wanting to do this one on. But yeah, it's just interesting to me how what Douglas is making the argument of there is, hey, these guys, Darryl Cooper and Ian Carroll, don't know, which I don't even know if Ian Carroll, I've never really listened to him much, so I don't know what he's talking about. But he goes off on Darryl Cooper saying, well, Darryl Cooper doesn't know what he's talking about, and since he's not informed on Winston Churchill, he shouldn't talk about Winston Churchill. Okay. But then Douglas Murray doesn't know about or listen to Darryl Cooper to such a point he didn't know his name. So it's like that, those contradictions back and back, just super bad faith. It's dishonest, and honestly, to try to make that on the Joe Rogan podcast, it's like it doesn't seem like he really thought Dave Smith and Joe Rogan were actually intelligent. I think Douglas Murray came into this thinking like, oh, I'm the smart one here, so I don't need to prepare. And he ended up getting his ass whooped up on for it. Like, it's bad. So I'll be doing some other videos on this on this podcast today. So stay tuned, like, share, subscribe, do all the things you know you need to do, and I'll catch y'all next time.